you. I appreciate you. Yeah. Yeah, Mike's. I'm good. The August, yeah. All right, thanks. All righty, I've got 7 o'clock, guys. Trying to. I put handouts on the front pews if I didn't catch you when you came in, or on the back little stand there in the middle. Yeah, I'm on. I've got a few announcements before we begin, and as people are coming in, there's handouts on that little back stand there in the middle, and then on the front 2 pews if I didn't catch you when you came in. Tomorrow morning, men's breakfast, guys. It's time to get up early. Be here at 6:30. John, you look excited. About noon. This Sunday, June 15th, is Father's Day, and we would like to honor all of our fathers and special men at Summers with donuts for dads and dudes. I like that. Donuts for dads and dudes. And that will be in the Activity Center before Bible class. And we thank you, dads and dudes, for being a special part of our Summers family. There will be a baby shower for Peyton and Mackenzie Cole on June 29th from 2 to 4 in the fellowship room. They are having a girl, and they are registered at Amazon. And as you know, we had the summertime kickoff last Wednesday, and so there's always a need for snacks. And so if you'd like to help with that, you can get with Allison Penrod, or there's a sign-up genius that Allison posted on the Summers Avenue Family Exchange page. Some of you may remember Barbara Stafford, who worshiped with us several years ago. She became ill and was needing a liver transplant, and evidently there is one available for her, and she is in Houston, hopefully getting that done. And then Tim and Rebecca Jorgensen and Mary, Tim's brother Eric passed away around 11 o'clock today, and they have gone to Texas to be with them, and they will be there through the arrangements. Wanda Baird took her daughter Marie to Baptist Hospital yesterday with chest pain. Don't have an outcome on that yet. And then, pardon? They put her in a nursing home. Robinson Center? Okay. Thank you. And then we need to remember those who have had long-term health problems and are not able to get out much. Lovell Davis, Joe Ellis, Gail Jenkins, Joel Gray, Gil Myatt, and I thought I saw Doyle here a while ago. There's Doyle. I'm taking you off of this list. You're not on this list anymore. Okay. You want the sympathy part, right? Okay. And then Orrin and Imogene Robinson, and then Sue Simmons. So anyway, I'm glad everyone was able to to join us. Remember, I will Lynetta has kindly agreed to try to get everybody's name on. I'm gonna go through that list and I will email out the class plan each week so that you can kind of look at that ahead of time. And then anyway, lost my train of thought there, Sean. Anyway, family. Yeah. So anyway, I'll try to get that out Monday or Tuesday so you can take a look at it. Remember that we've got people tuned in on our YouTube channel and on the Facebook page, and right now is that me or you?
Well, it's not coming through on Bill's, so we're going to switch. I'll turn it down.
Okay. Okay, how's that, everybody? Ernest, can you hear me? All right. All right, we fixed our technical problems. Can you turn it down just a little bit? I'm getting an echo, Tim. Thank you. And anyway, so on the first page of the handout, and remember for those who came in just now, there's handouts on the little stand in the back, in the middle, and then on the front two pews. You want to get those. But anyway, you remember last week was summertime kickoff, and so this is our first session. And then the last session is ice cream, and I am not going to be the one that interferes with the ice cream, so we won't have class that night. So anyway, the introduction, we will be covering parables of the Bible, and of course, there's no way to cover them all. I'm going to pick and choose the ones that I wanted, the ones that I liked. And anyway, I hope that you appreciate them. And as you well know, parables were used extensively throughout the Old and New Testament. Jesus was probably the most famous person using parables, used them frequently, sometimes to irritate people and sometimes to educate people and help people learn the truth. But it was used, the prophets, especially Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, they oftentimes were taught through parables and then turned around and then taught the people. A couple of interesting kind of outliers. Daniel received some messages, but at different times he was told to keep it to himself, keep it secret. I've given you the references on the handout. Daniel 7:28, he said, I kept the matter to myself. In Daniel 8:26, keep the vision secret. And we don't know all the reasons for that, but that was his instructions, and he did that for a period of time. Another one that is talked about quite a bit is Hosea. You can find lots of arguments all around that book. There's some people who take it as a literal message. Some people take it as purely figurative. Some people take it as a combination maybe of events. But it is one out there that people, if you want to get people stirred up, that's a good one to go to if you enjoy that sort of thing. But anyway, so I'm not covering that. I'm not going to do that one. But anyway, and of course, as I mentioned, Jesus did very well. Definitions. This part I want to go through quickly. You can read as well as I can. In the Old Testament, the word for parable could mean a proverb, a similitude, or a parable. In the New Testament, it means to represent or stand for something, or the likeness or resemblance. And as the Truth for Today commentary pointed out in Matthew 13, simply stated, a parable is an illustration that uses a known truth in order to explain something unknown. Or, as I've often heard throughout my Christian life, an earthly story with a heavenly meaning, and that's probably one that we've all probably heard. The benefits, of course, of using parables is that it's a story, and it gets your attention, like fables. But these are not fables. These stories get your attention because it's something that people are familiar with, and so it kind of gets your attention, and so it gets you started. So why did Jesus, he used parables throughout his ministry. And why did he use parables? Anybody like to throw out an opinion? Easy to understand? But were they? Not necessarily. In fact, he's going to say, not necessarily. They were somewhat easy to understand the story, but were they easy to understand the meaning? Chris says no. George says no. You want to clarify? I am. True. True. Sort of, yeah. I'll go with you a little ways on that, Mike. From Jesus' own words, he was pretty clear about you're not getting it because your heart is hard. You see, but you don't see. You hear, but you don't hear. And so they should have got it, but why didn't they get it? They didn't want to hear the truth, did they? So what should have been wasn't. So whose fault was it? The hearer or the speaker?
It's said the same way, regardless of who they are.
Yes.
It's up to them to understand, and plus it deals, like you said, the heart. And, it's kind of like dealing with kids. You can say a lot of words until you finally get their attention, they don't understand.
You mean like that, get their attention, George, or no? Okay. Let me read some from Mark and Matthew.
Jesus say one time that, or just infer that he was taught all the people in the audience, the ones that didn't get it were the ones that didn't want to, because they were the scribes and Pharisees, and they were going to lose their clout.
Yes, and that was a real threat to them. People in power who are having their power questioned, they don't like that. And I mentioned in a class taught previously a quote from Voltaire, it's dangerous to be right when the authority is wrong, because the authority tends to squash you if you're right and they're wrong, especially if you point it out to them as Jesus did. And so he got squashed, crucified, but God knew that was going to happen. It was part of the plan. Chris.
I think it's also, one of the places where Jesus does the whole quotes Old Testament, seeing that they won't see, hearing that.
Yes, he quotes Isaiah 40. Right. Yes. And a parallel to that is in Matthew 13 that I've given on the handout. And I'll read a little bit more of that. And thank you, Chris, I didn't put Luke on my handout. But Jesus said, to you it has been granted to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been granted. And then on down to verse 12, because while seeing, they do not see, and while hearing, they do not hear. And then he quotes Isaiah. And that was the problem. They listened, but they really weren't listening. That's why the Bereans in Acts were such a great example, because Paul preached, but then they went to the scriptures and checked it out. And I will tell you, it would disappoint me if you don't do the same to me, is go back and look at these verses and see and make sure that what I'm saying is correct. In Matthew 13:36, it talks about Jesus left the crowds, went to the house. His disciples came to us and said, explain to us the parable. Because they wanted to know. They were seeking. They wanted to know more, as we should. So we shouldn't just read it and go, okay, so there's tares in the field, so what? On your handout, I've given you quotes from 3 different faithful commenters from Truth for Today and the Bowles Commentary, Gospel Advocate. And they talked about the hardness of their heart, and that's what we've been going through. So saying all that, so when we get to the interpretation part, we've got to look and see and look at the history, around that event that he's talking about or whatever it could be. And the thing that I put number one is when we're trying to interpret a parable is don't go crazy. Don't go nuts trying to find each and every jot and tittle something behind it. In Herbert Locklear's book, All the Parables of the Bible, he gave the example of how crazy people can get on the parable of the Good Samaritan. He said this one guy said the man who was assaulted and left is Adam. The priest and the Levite are the old law. The Samaritan was Jesus. The inn is the church. And the innkeeper, my favorite, was the Apostle Paul. That's what I'm meaning when I say don't go crazy. It's kind of the same thing people do in Revelation and Ezekiel and Daniel. Don't go crazy, because we can get there. And so the words of Paul talking about to be diligent in how we study and interpret the word. Be diligent to present yourself approved of God as a workman who does not need to be ashamed, accurately handling the word of truth. And the only way to do that is to spend time in the word and studying every day, every day. So I want to give some examples in the Old Testament of different approaches of how parables were used in the Old Testament. And then next week we'll start with parables in the New Testament. So the first one, very famous, the parable of the ewe lamb. And this is in 2 Kings 11. We know the story. Everybody in here has been to Bible class and knows the story. David sinned with Bathsheba, and then he spent a lot of time trying to cover it up. He brought Uriah the Hittite home on leave to try to get him to spend time with his wife because she was now pregnant because of the sin of David and Bathsheba. I got to kind of take a pause here and tell a little bit of a humorous story because I loved and appreciated Marie Haggard. And y'all know what a special person. But I was teaching this lesson a few years ago, and I said, I kind of sympathize with Bathsheba. He's the king, and he can do what he wants. She didn't have any choice, And I thought Marie was going to come out of her chair and said, she very rarely said anything in class, but she said, you men are so dumb. She said, that woman up there without any clothes on, she knew he could see her, and she knew what she was. I was sitting there going, I don't know who's teaching the class now, but it ain't me. But anyway, Marie was going to tell you, wasn't she, David? She was going to tell you. If you got her opinion, you were going to get it. So she laid me out on that. When I got home, Karen said, she's right. But anyway. Yeah, Karen wasn't in the class at the time. You'd have been amening her, wouldn't you? Yeah. So anyway, enough about that. So there was sin involved. David spent a lot of time trying to cover it up. Spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, even to the point where he arranged the murder of Uriah. This is probably, to me, one of the saddest stories in the Old Testament. Huh?
Marie didn't like Esther either.
No. You're right. Yeah, she had a word or two to say to me about Esther too. Yeah. Yes, we love and miss Marie. Anyway, so as we know, God saw everything. He knew everything. He even gave the plan to murder Uriah to Uriah to carry to Joab and say, here's how we're going to get this man killed. Murdered is murder. It wasn't a battle loss, it was murder. Even costing some of his other troops who were totally innocent in this situation. So not only did he arrange the murder of Uriah, he arranged the murder of other soldiers that he should have been loyal to. He was their leader. But this is what he did. But God saw everything. In 2 Samuel 11:27, when the time of mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife, and she bore him a son. But The thing that David had done was evil in the sight of the Lord. So God sends Nathan, probably one of the bravest men in the Old Testament, to walk into the palace and give this speech to the most powerful man in the nation. There were two men in one city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a great many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one little ewe lamb, which he bought and nourished. It grew up together with him and his children, and it would eat his bread and drink of his cup and lie in his bosom. It was like a daughter to him. And now a traveler came to the rich man, and he was unwilling to take from his own flock or his own herd, and to prepare for the wayfarer who had come to him. Rather, he took the poor man's ewe lamb, prepared it for the man who had come to him. Verse 5, David's anger burned greatly against the man. He said to Nathan, "As the Lord lives, surely the man who had done this deserves to die. He must make restitution for the lamb fourfold, because he did this thing and had no compassion." David walked right into the story. He walked right into the trap, not blinking an eye. Now, I don't know how, evidently quite a bit of time has passed because of her pregnancy and having the child, and so I don't know how much time, but David just, like a dumb animal, just walked right into it. The very next verse, Nathan said to David, "You are the man." I can't imagine the tension in that room, in that palace, because you didn't visit the king, just you. There's other people around. And so for Nathan to take this risk with all these soldiers around who are assigned to protect the king, you're him. It's you. He had to be devastated. So that's probably the perfect example of how a parable should and would work. The person who is to be taught and confronted don't have a clue of what they're walking into. Where is, and I hesitate to use this word, where is the beauty of this parable? What to you stands out of how this parable worked so well? He repented, as we know. What else? He convicted himself. He convicted himself. Because was there any getting out of it now? I mean, he judged and executed himself. There was nothing he could say. It was perfect, a perfect trap. And thankfully, some kings in this day and time would have said to Nathan and to a guard, take him and take him out and execute him, because kings didn't tolerate that kind of stuff very well. So to David's credit, he repented and was remorseful. And most of us are familiar with Psalms 51 and his prayer of penance and how sorry he was for what had happened. Of course, we know the child was struck and died of an illness. Of course, one of the lessons is sinful acts don't always affect the person who commits the sinful act, does it? It teaches us that innocent people suffer for our actions that we do sometimes, oftentimes. And that's one of the lessons about sin and sinful actions. You know, people can commit things in secret and do things that they shouldn't be doing, but eventually it will affect those around them. It will affect their family or their friends or their work or whatever their responsibilities are to continue in this behavior. And David's certainly, the rest of his life, there was turmoil in it. But as you read the rest of those verses, 7 through 15, after he drops the hammer on him, and Nathan gives him his sermon. He said, "This is the message from God. I gave you Saul's house, and I gave you everything you wanted, and Verse 9, he says, you have despised the word of the Lord by doing evil. You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword. See, the thing is, he taught him, he says, is David actually the one that killed Uriah? No. He's not actually the one that pierced his body and killed him, but he just as well had, because he arranged it. He arranged it. So, you know some of the rest of the story. Okay, you can turn to Jeremiah 18 and 19. We'll look at two different types. Oh, I'm sorry. On what page? Well, I'm not looking at the handout. What's the? Yes, but I'm not looking at the handout. What is the verbiage on? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yes. Let me correct that in my notes right now. All righty. So in Jeremiah 18, there's a different approach taken, and God is directly speaking to Jeremiah, and he's doing a couple things. He sends him to a place to get a message, to get a message that he wants him to get. And he uses a parable that he's actually watching happen. He's watching someone do this, being the potter. And he's going to, after he gives him the message and teaches him about what's going on there, then he says, now go and tell the people. So in Jeremiah 18, he says, the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah from the Lord, arise and go down to the potter's house, and I will announce my words to you. Verse 3, he went to the potter's house. He was making on the wheel, but the vessel that he was making of clay was spoiled in the hand of the potter, so he remade it into another vessel, as it pleased the potter. In verse 5, then after he observes this potter working, then the word comes to Jeremiah. It says, can I not, O house of Israel, deal with you as the potter does? Declares the Lord, can behold like clay in the potter's hand, so are you in my hand, O house of Israel. At one moment I might speak concerning a nation, I lost my place. At one moment, in verse 7, I might speak concerning a nation or concerning a kingdom to uproot, to pull down, or to destroy. If that nation against which I have spoken turns from its evil, I will relent. So then in verse 11 he says, speak to the men of Judah against the inhabitants of Jerusalem, saying, behold, thus says the Lord, behold, I am fashioning a calamity. So what was the lesson that God was getting across to Jeremiah? Well, there's more than one lesson. What are the lessons that God is teaching Jeremiah by having him watch this potter with the clay? Chris? I like the way you worded that. So on behalf of people listening, if Israel doesn't do what I have, did you say designed them to do, then I will make something, yes. In other words, God's going to get his way, period. To me, one of the incredible backstories to the Old Testament is God made a promise to Abraham way back in Genesis chapter 12. And as you read through the Old Testament, all the times that Israel strayed and rebelled and everything that they did, and yet God was still able to bring that plan to fruition. To me, is unbelievable, incredible, how God was able to accomplish that through people who were stubborn, rebellious, whatever adjective you want to put on it. And in many times, very evil. But yet, so one of the lessons is God's sovereignty. I'm going to get my way. I said to Abraham, through your seed, all nations are going to be blessed. And he was able to accomplish that in spite of everything that Israel did. It's incredible to be able to, that he was able to do that. And it proves the sovereignty of God. So, any other lesson? What about the clay itself? Did it have to be pliable, or what if it happened if it got hard? Is there a point of no return? Who said yes? Larry. Is there a point where he's going to smash the clay and I'm done? Yes. It's all showing God's sovereignty, and he's really going to address even more of that in the very next chapter in the pot. Yes. I'm sorry, I can barely hear you. Yes, okay. Yes, I'm with you. I don't know about this particular case because is the potter really going to turn the clay loose in this particular example till he's done with it? I mean, yes. I mean, I don't know that there's a yes. Yes. You know, there's and again, I don't want to be that thing that I said, don't go crazy on this, but it's like, to me, I almost see this clay as there is no option. God's going to get his way, period. And whatever the clay does, it's still in his hands, one way or another. And I may be going too far with that, and I would not disagree with anybody that says otherwise. Lynetta, did you have your hand up?
Whether it's Israel or if we're looking at ourselves, as long as we're pliable and moldable, God can fashion us into many different forms for his purpose.
Correct.
And so, yeah, that's a valuable lesson of the potter.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about how bad Israel was. Jeremiah is one of my favorite prophets of the Old Testament. I mean, you're talking about somebody had his work cut out for him. I mean, Nathan, yes, he walked into a hornet's nest with David. Jeremiah's entire life was a hornet's nest. I mean, the people burned God's word. One of the kings just took and cut it up and burned it. That's in Jeremiah 36. They had actually put idols into the temple in Jeremiah 7. They threw Jeremiah into a cistern in Jeremiah 38. And it was so bad that God gave this instruction, which to me is devastating. In Jeremiah 14, verse 10, "Thus says the Lord to his people, even though they have loved to wander, they have not kept their feet in check. Therefore, the Lord does not accept them. Now he will remember their iniquity and call their sins into account. So the Lord said to me," to Jeremiah, this is the devastating phrase, "do not pray for the welfare of these people." I don't think it gets any worse than that as far as a relationship. It can't. "When they fast, I am not going to listen to their cry. When they offer burnt offering and grain offering, I am not going to accept them. Rather, I am going to make an end of them by the sword, famine, and pestilence." In the Truth for Today commentary, the writer of that commentary said, They didn't know God, but God knew them. And that's scary, isn't it? It holds true today. It absolutely does. The way that the writer of the Truth for Today commentary, he says they were at the stage of not knowing God, but known by God, is the exact quote. They didn't know God, but he certainly knew them, and he was done. He stick a fork in them, he was done. And that is frightening, but it tells me there is a point of no, there is a point. There is a point. And that's scary. There were consequences. So the very next one, Jeremiah 19, the very next chapter. He tells them to go and buy, here we got the pot again, go and buy a potter's earthenware jar, take some of the elders of the people and some of the senior priests, then go out into the valley of Ben Hinnom, which is by the entrance of the potsherd gate, and proclaim the words that I tell you, and say, hear the word of the Lord, O kings of Judah and inhabitants of Jerusalem. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, behold, I am about to bring a calamity upon this place, at which the ears of everyone that hears it will tingle, because they have forsaken me, and have made this an alien place, and have burned sacrifices in it to other gods, neither they or their forefathers, nor the kings of Judah had ever known, because they have filled this place with the blood of innocent, and have built high places to Baal, to burn their sons in the fire as a burnt offering. This is how depraved that they had gotten to. In verse 7, I will cause them to fall by the sword. In verse 9, I will make them eat the flesh of their own sons and the flesh of their daughters, and they will eat one another's flesh in the siege and in the distress with which their enemies and those who seek their life will distress them. Verse 10, then you are to break the jar in the sight of the men who accompany you, and say to them, thus says the Lord of hosts, just so will I break this people and this city, even as one breaks a potter's vessel, which cannot again be repaired, and they will bury in Topheth, because there is no other place. This is how I will treat this place and inhabitants. These things that he said they were doing, it's recorded. They resorted to cannibalism, which they did in 2 Kings chapter 6. Josephus, the Jewish historian who lived in the first century or so, recounts an example of that during the siege of the Romans in AD 70, said that they actually did that. And they did. They put idols in the temple. They did all those things. They sacrificed their children to Molech and Baal, living baby sacrifices. I don't know how much more depraved you can get. I don't know how to describe any depravity worse than that. But that's where they were. So in this case, what is God saying when he broke the pot? And he told them to break this pot in front of these people. What is he telling them? He's done. He's done. We can glue a pot back together, if you want to get technical, yeah, but it's really never the same. I've never been able to put anything back together that's been broken like that. So, how do you see parables? Just kind of your general thoughts as we close out the class. How do you feel about parables? What's your thoughts? I mean, what's the purpose? I want to know how you feel. What's your gut reaction to this form of teaching? Effective, not effective, good, bad, what?
Depends on which part of that story you are. Because if you're not paying attention to it, it's just a story to you, but the end is still going to be bad. But if you're on the outside and realize that God is your God, you're going to feel sorry for the fact these people aren't listening to God.
So, we know that they watched him break the pot, and we know that they heard the speech, but did they change their ways? just as kind of a thought going back in the history, another very familiar story that we have in 1 Kings 18 is Elijah confronting the prophets of Baal, another favorite of mine. And you know, there were all these prophets, and Elijah confronted them. And he won that confrontation. You know the story. He won the confrontation, and the fire came down and licked up the stone, the water, the sacrifice, everything of his. But, you know, Elijah kept saying, well, Baal must be asleep. He's not hearing you. You know, it went on and on. But Jezebel, remember, Jezebel said, I'm going to kill you. And he took off running, and he went and hid. And God had a talk with him, a still small voice talk with him. And sometimes we all need that, perhaps. But to me, it was an encouragement to Elijah, because Elijah thought he was the only one. He said, I'm it, and she's going to kill me. She is going to kill me. She vowed. And God told him, there are 7,000 people in Israel that have not bowed to Baal. 7,000. So you're not alone. Way more than enough that God needed. My problem is I always see the half-empty part of the cup. What I see is there's about 600,000 or 700,000 people in Judah at this particular time. 7,000? 7,000? That's all? 1%. I'm going, but God was telling Elijah, I got more than I need. I got plenty. And so, you know, that's, to me, we look out there and we go, why aren't people getting the message? Why aren't they understanding? Well, the world never has. It's always been a minority. Jesus said at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, what? Broad is the way, many find that way to destruction, but few find this other. So it behooves us on these parables, just like Jesus said, they're not getting it because their heart is hard. They're not getting it because they don't want to get it. And so for us, as we go through these parables, we got to spend some time in there. We got to think about it. We got to meditate on it. And I encourage each of us to spend time in the Word every day, and spending time on the Word, because some of these parables have really got some deep teaching to them. So I appreciate the comments and everyone being here tonight. And we had several people online watching, and we're glad for that. We appreciate everybody who's online joining us tonight. So you're dismissed.